Hi everyone, Harry here to talk about the continuing fallout from the Supreme Court's decision not to reach a decision in the Idaho case in June. So you may remember, the Idaho case concerned a clash between federal law and state law. And the state law in Idaho was very strict and draconian in when abortions could be given. And the federal law that is still completely on the books has to do with emergency care. It's the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, EMTALA, and it directs that when there is it's got a slightly different standard, and it says, look, if you're getting federal funds and you're running a hospital, you have to provide emergency care. And it goes on to define what emergency care means. You must care for a person and certainly a pregnant woman who's in a condition that could reasonably be expected to result in placing the health of the individual in serious jeopardy, serious impairment to bodily functions, or serious dysfunction of a bodily organ or part. So we've got a series now of tragic stories, about 100 or so in the last 2 or 3 years, in which exactly this situation was presented, and the emergency room physicians declined to give proper medical care, which would have involved a termination of pregnancy because of fear of their own state system. This happened in Texas, and there's now been a complaint by a woman and the Center for Reproductive Rights. And the woman, the basic situation is she came in and presented with what seemed like an ectopic pregnancy, a pregnancy growing in her fallopian tube. They declined to treat her. They sent her away. This happened 2 or 3 times. And eventually, her life was put in danger so that the state could act. And she turned out to have a serious ectopic pregnancy that resulted in the removal of one of her fallopian tubes, and that will have ongoing consequences and compromise her ability to have children. This woman, Kyleigh Thurman, is the sort of picture of the poster child for the complaint, but it involves more than that. And what the center is asking for is an independent investigation of whether a particular Texas hospital is violating federal law by not giving emergency care as defined. Often in these cases, this is a complaint to Health and Human Services. It's an administrative complaint. That's what a person has to do. The Idaho case in the Supreme Court was the government saying your law, Idaho, violates the federal law. This is an individual, so they're bringing a complaint to Health and Human Services. Typically, Health and Human Services defer to a state agency to investigate. And an interesting part of this complaint is a request, please don't let the state do it. Look at Texas and what they've done. Look at the hostility they've shown. They wrote an amicus brief in the U.S. Supreme Court on the Idaho case, and they've passed a series of draconian restrictions involving both here, more specifically, and generally in the area. So they are looking for HHS to come in, do an independent investigation, and find that there's been a violation of federal law. So this complaint, however, is occasion for the presentation of 100 or so horror stories that involve similar failures to give care and consequential medical injury. So we have in Florida a 15-week pregnant woman leaked amniotic fluid for an hour, but in the emergency wait room, an ultrasound revealed that she had no amniotic fluid surrounding the fetus, which is really dangerous, can cause infections. But abortions after 15 weeks were banned in Florida at the time. So they said that they wouldn't treat her, even though if you think about the definition under federal law, serious impairment to bodily functions, serious dysfunction of a bodily organ or part, it clearly qualified. And we've had a number of women who, as a result of the failure to apply federal law, have been left with permanent injury, sometimes to their ability to have children, but sometimes more generally, women that we have detailed in the complaint, and then just in the sort of stories that give rise to, that are part of the reporting of the complaint, going into septic shock, being, completely, you have just doctors who they allege, just in Texas, are just scared to do their job, which involves the application of federal law. That is still the law, though the Supreme Court hasn't decided the issue. And so there are some states who are trying to keep from complying out of fear. In Texas, you can have, I think, 99-year criminal sentence as a doctor for performing an abortion. This gets a little medical and in the weeds, but a particular problem here is it can be difficult. An ectopic pregnancy almost invariably will not come to term, and so there's no interest in a fetus or possible life there, but it can be difficult, very difficult apparently, to determine whether you have an ectopic pregnancy on your hands. And so the upshot could be the call is made in favor of supposedly not doing an abortion, that is to say, not on an embryo, and ignoring potentially grave consequences to the ongoing health of the mother. And that's what seems to be happening around the country in a number of red states. So this issue remains. In Idaho, where the Supreme Court decided the case by saying, we shouldn't have taken this in the first place. Oops, no standing, basically. So never mind. And that restored the status quo there, which was that a district court had enjoined the Idaho law as against the emergency federal standard. So in Idaho, this isn't now happening, but it's, Texas is a very good example, as this complaint shows, where doctors afraid of the consequences of performing an abortion, even when doing it, is dictated by the standards of emergency care and treatment that that federal law provides, and that hospitals therefore are duty bound to apply. Even so, they don't want to go to jail for 99 years, etc. So the strong legal claim is that the state, by passing these draconian statutes, has interfered with federal law in a way that is clearly causing injury to women who would receive treatment, but for under the federal standard, but for the draconian abortion laws. So, starting with the woman in Texas, who along with others now has permanent injury as a result of the failure to give emergency care as dictated under federal law. So this will now go to HHS. We'll see if they do an independent investigation. At the same time, the issue is, kind of percolating along in different places. It will be decided probably by the Supreme Court. It should be a straightforward federal law controls, and that means emergency care has to be given as defined by federal law, but you can't really predict it. With this court at the argument in the Idaho case, there was some suggestion that you can't use the spending clause, the idea that, hey, you're taking our money, therefore you have to, dance to our tune where emergency care is concerned, that they would not adopt that view. So if and when it comes to the Supreme Court, notwithstanding the clarity of federal law, it will be certainly quite possible that federal law will be struck down, and women in the situation of the woman in this case who wound up with permanent injuries will in fact be not have the benefit of federal law and will have to bear those risks of serious ongoing injury that comes short of an immediate risk of death, which would be the exception in most statutes, not even all of them. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.